Good morning, everybody. Mike Naso here with the latest on the tropics. This is now the 10th hurricane season that these video updates have been going on. Started back in '05. Of course, we all remember that year, very horrific hurricane season for the entire Atlantic basin. And we've had a couple of seasons now to where we've been rather inactive. We've had three seasons in a row, 2010, 2011, and 2012, where we had a ton of tropical activity. But other than Irene in 11 and Isaac and Sandy in 2012, we haven't had a whole lot for the United States. And the last major hurricane to hit the U.S. was actually Wilma way back in 2005, the first year these video updates began. So that'll give you some sense for pause, thinking, whether the season's active or not, we might be in a situation here to where sooner or later luck's going to run out. Now we do have some activity on this first day of July. When we look out the Atlantic Basin today, you can see a couple of features. First of all, off the coastline of Florida here, this is Tropical Depression 1, and this is forecast to become a tropical storm. The first name of this hurricane season is Arthur, and it is forecast to become a tropical storm and eventually the season's first hurricane and take a trek somewhere up here towards the north and eventually the northeast. Whether or not there's a direct landfall or some sort of impact, there are definitely going to be impacts in the forms of heavy rain, high surf, and really a miserable 4th of July weekend along the eastern seaboard of the U.S. if certain things play out. Off the screen, you can see a little bit here on the left side. This is Tropical Storm Aleta, which continues to sit and spin. We'll talk about that. The rest of the Atlantic looking rather quiet at this time. Note the thunderstorms here in the Midwest of the U.S. It's that time of year, very, very hot and humid here in the Midwest, and we're going to see if we get some thunderstorms there today. But first and foremost with the tropics is our first depression of the year. TD1, as of 5 a.m. Eastern Time, it was at 27.6 north, 79.3 west. Winds were 35 miles per hour, gusting to 45, and is drifting west at 2. It's almost stationary. It quit moving last night, didn't move much this morning, and the pressure is 1,008 millibars, so it's getting a little bit lower there. Forecast again to become Tropical Storm Arthur and spend the next 2 days drifting to the north and strengthening, and then by the 4th of July, Independence Day, Friday, be a Category 1 hurricane, and between Friday morning and Saturday morning take off. Now, whether it moves closer to the coast and makes landfall along the Carolinas here, or whether it moves far enough to where it never directly impacts land, is just too early to tell. Also, it cannot be ruled out some sort of, at the very least, indirect impacts to the New England area if it were to make it in that general vicinity. Now, obviously, because it is forecast to become a tropical storm and might become one rather soon, we do have a tropical storm watch, Flagler Beach, the east coast of Florida here. Watch out in case the tropical storm force winds do move onshore. You'll be ready for them just in case. Now, when we look at the latest satellite imagery of our tropical storm, tropical depression still, the first thing that you'll notice here is that it's clearly bursting with convection on the southern side. It's sitting right on the edge of much more favorable conditions down here and still somewhat unfavorable conditions up to the north. But you can see that convection is very deep and bursting. It's not light orange, it's not, bluish colors. It's pretty deep red burst in here because the waters are very warm and the shear is much lower to the south, and wind shear is expected to decrease. The conditions are expected to be favorable for continued development. So that's why we're concerned about this strengthening into a hurricane. Here's the water vapor imagery, and this shows a little bit better what I was saying. The center is trying to almost relocate inside the deep convection. If that happens, everything's out the window. Because if we have a center relocation here in the deep convection, then it's in a much more dynamic environment to strengthen at a more quick pace. Not saying it would do anything extreme, but it could become a hurricane sooner rather than later. And you can see this dry air too, much more favorable than yesterday. Yesterday it was dealing with a lot more of it. The environment's definitely starting to moisten up. it made a right move by moving from off South Carolina all the way down here towards the Bahamas, because that's a much, much more favorable area for potential development. You can see on the radar too, this is the radar looking over Melbourne, Miami, the entire coast of Florida. Note here this spinning. There does seem to be some twisting where I just circled, despite the center being more off towards the north and west. And that's giving me a little bit of a concern that we might start to see that center relocate more in this region here near Freeport in the Bahamas. And if that happens, then we could be seeing more consolidation and organization of the tropical cyclone. So we're going to wait and see exactly what happens with our depression, but it should become a tropical storm later on this morning, or certainly by this afternoon, I'd guess. Now here's the wind shear map, and you can see there's about, say, 10 knots of wind shear over the top of it, but not a whole lot. To be honest, the wind shear in the Atlantic and the western Atlantic at least seems to have decreased. We have pretty favorable conditions in much of the Gulf, favorable conditions northwest Caribbean, and starting to be favorable over our depression. So as far as upper level environments, the environment should continue to get more favorable. You can see upper level divergence over that convection, which is firing in the Bahamas, which is going to cause rainfall. You already saw on that radar, the rain is going to be an issue wherever it sits and spins, especially if it's almost stationary. Here's the look at the water temperatures in the Atlantic. And again, I'm not compared to last season, which was the slowest season in as far as hurricanes go, and major hurricanes that I think I've ever seen. It might be average, maybe below average, but it's not nearly as slow looking as last year when you have very warm waters and you get these homegrown systems. Even one can end up being something to keep an eye on, as we see today. And as our system pulls off towards the Carolinas here, is going to follow that Gulf Stream straight on up. And you can see the waters are pretty warm here. I mean, right now it's sitting between 83 and 88 degree water, depending on what buoy you read. So water temperature is not a problem. Upper level wind shear is going to be getting better. And I just showed you the dry air is going to abate. So we're going to have to deal with this. And we'll see exactly what happens with it. My guess is that it does end up becoming a hurricane eventually, especially if this bursting pattern continues. Now, I did want to go out to the Eastern Pacific, and we have two systems. This is Douglas, and Douglas is moving northwest at 6 miles an hour, 1,001 millibars. Winds are around 45, and is forecast to eventually weaken and head on out. And then behind Douglas, we have Aleta, and Aleta has winds a little bit stronger, 50 miles an hour, is drifting south at 2. There's going to be an interaction between the two, and there is already, and you'll see it loop around here and then head west. And when you look at the latest satellite imagery, you can clearly see we have our two systems here. Douglas wrapping up a little bit better this morning. It definitely has a good outflow pattern, but it's not looking very intense. Although if it keeps wrapping like that, there could be an increase in strength. And Aleta down here, which is bursting in response to this northerly shear from the outflow of Douglas, and that's why it's drifting south, and this one will head out and this one will loop around, almost a Fujiwara effect. So it's interesting to watch the Eastern Pacific. Western Pacific, nothing going on right now. So that'll pretty much do it for this update, the first of hurricane season 2014. I want to thank everybody who views these updates. Leave your comments and thoughts, questions in our channel here. And I did want to let you know too, I know there are a lot of young hurricane trackers out there who I've seen them post on different videos, comments and whatnot saying, oh, I was 3 years old when Katrina hit. And, I was 4 years old when Hurricane Andrew hit. So I've been there. I've been, it makes me feel old though, because now all of a sudden there are people much, much younger than me following hurricanes, and they might not even remember some of the ones we went through. But we'll see what we go through with this hurricane, which should develop off the Carolina coast by the 4th of July. I'm Mike Naso. I will see you next time.